I'm Baldwin Vanderbilt, and we're here today to introduce Bob Naef, who was born in this area in 1927. And we were just talking a little bit about your Aunt Hedwig.
Hedwig,
And tell us a little bit about the park, and you mentioned something about Strawberry Lane.
Yeah, she named Strawberry Avenue. And actually I had an aunt that was killed at the time they put in Strawberry Avenue with a stump that was blown. When they were putting in the road, a stump blew and took care of my aunt. So that's...
Was that a sister of Hetty?
Hetty, yeah, my mother's sisters.
Yeah, yeah. Because I've met your mother, I don't know, 3 or 4 times.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is it true that, something I heard, but I haven't...
Careful now.
Yeah, that she liked to have a little wine in her tea?
My dad did. My dad used to make wine, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Good Swiss.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a couple of different houses. I was wondering maybe you could start out with where you first lived and...
Well, I was raised on the corner of Naef and River Road that his brother and my youngest son lives in now.
Okay.
There's a vacant lot and then his house. And that's where I was born in Oregon City because there weren't any hospitals. That was the only hospital in the area. So I was born in Oregon City and then went to the house there on River Road.
And do you happen to recall when that was built?
About 1925, I believe.
Okay.
The original house was where the 7-Eleven sits now.
Okay.
That was the original. Yeah, there's pictures there of it.
Oh, the original.
Just east of the 7-Eleven store. And then the dairy was across the road.
Okay. Well, I remember your brother once said that because Social Security used to be where now the Oregon Trucking Association is.
Pretty close, right.
And so he went there to start collecting. He said, "Where were you born?" And he said, "Here."
Yeah.
And he said, "What do you mean here?" Here.
Yeah.
So the dairy was actually on the other side of the
Naef
highway.
Road,
Okay. And trying to get perspective on the Steele's Pansy Garden. Was that where the drive-in used to be?
No. In about, I don't remember, in the early my uncle, my dad's brother, died during the flu epidemic after World War I, which is about 1917 or 18. And at that time, evidently my grandfather, who still had the property, passed away, and the property was split. The north side went to my dad, and the south side went to Otto, which was my dad's brother's wife. And they had the drive-in. And the property north of Naef Road was where the Pansy Garden was, and they lost it during the Depression. And so the Steeles bought the property and put the Pansy Garden where the car dealerships are now, the Chevrolet dealership, and all the way up to Harold.
Okay. That's interesting.
So that was a kind of a friction in the family when that was split up.
Well, now, Otto's wife was Rose?
Yes.
Right? And lived on the corner house of Naef and River Road, right?
Right on the southeast corner.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And then my youngest son lives on the northeast corner.
On the other side of it. Yeah, okay, good.
And there was another Otto too. Otto, I think Otto's father's name was William. It's either Otto William or William Otto. It's all in.
I'm a genealogy freak.
Oh, good.
And so I will give this to you.
Well, I have a bunch.
Or you have one too, probably.
Actually, it's from the old Milwaukee Cemetery.
Yeah, and it shows Otto Naef, which would be your grandfather, Otto Henry Naef, and then Otto William Naef.
Right.
So lots of, and then there's several Ernests also.
Oh, really?
Well, your father,
right,
and then Ernest, and your brother. I guess that's only two of them. The other thing that I have, this is the 1910 census. It's very hard to read, but it shows the Naef family. And it says the year that immigrated was 1887, and it lists your grandparents
and great-grandparents
and your great-grandfather, who's called Hunts here, but other places it's called John Jacob.
Right.
And then your father and his brother.
Yeah, but my grandfather and great-grandfather came here first to pick out the property. They were Swiss, and so they almost went to Helvetia, which is out, but they settled here. Then my grandfather went back to Switzerland and brought my dad, who was 6 months old, back from Switzerland to where we are now.
Oh, really? So he went back and forth. Do you know how, did he go by train then back and forth? I would assume.
I don't know. I really don't know. Not to Switzerland.
That's a picture of the original house.
Oh, wow. Well, Mike Schmier here has a scanner, not right here, but if you're willing, we would love to be able to scan those,
Whatever
preserve them for history.
Prize-winning cows.
Wow, that's some great stuff there.
Yeah, there's a lot, whatever anybody wants. There's a,
You had it well organized, too.
yeah, we just went, actually Brian, my youngest son, here's the original cattle sale in
1919.
right, that's when they had one of the few herds of cattle at the time that were tuberculin free, which at the time was a big item.
Yeah.
So they had that, and I don't know whether at the time my great-grandfather died or what, but those are all the history of the cattle and where they were bred and so forth.
Yeah, so this gives the genealogy of the cattle.
Right, that's pretty important.
Yeah. Wow, that's fantastic. Well, I had one real simple, short little question, because there's people in this area who are saying, well, this is Oak Grove and that's Jennings Lodge. When you were growing up, did you consider yourself and your family to be part of Jennings Lodge or Oak Grove, or neither?
Oak Grove,
Oak Grove, okay.
because that's where the post office was. And there was also a post office in Jennings Lodge. So our address was Route 10, Box 812, Oak Grove. So then, I don't know when they changed from Oak Grove, and then they came to routes, and they eventually got to street numbers. So it's because the property originally went to the middle of River Road, but then I don't know what year they changed that, but then it went from the middle of River Road to where it is now, where the right-of-way is for the road. So we were always figured Oak Grove, but Jennings Lodge was, like you say,
Right closer.
yeah. The neighbor.
And talking about being young and education, did you go to Concord School then?
Yes.
And I assume you walked there and...
Yeah, I rode the bicycle.
And I was kind of curious, did they serve lunch there, or did
Yes, they did.
They did serve lunch.
They did learn.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And we're in the original, actually there was 3 Concord schools. There was a small one-room school where Brownell, so it's not Brownell now, it's that thrift store, the
Goodwill.
the Goodwill. Well, then just above the fence was where there was a one-room school, and I went to the first grade in that school. And then we moved to a school that was between that and the school that's there now, which was a larger school, and there's probably pictures of that in here someplace. And so there's actually 3 Concord schools.
Wow.
And his sister actually taught him at Concord.
That was
13 years older than him.
Yeah.
Ruth, right?
Right.
Yeah. Ruth and
Yeah.
Eldon, if I remember.
Yes, right, yeah.
Well, when your brother passed away, there was an estate sale. I went over there and bought an atlas, got home and opened it up, and what did I find inside there? You might want Doug to take a look at it too.
I didn't know I ever got a reward. An award. For gosh sakes.
I'll be darned.
That is a
1939.
penmanship certificate
It wouldn't work now, I'll tell you.
from 19...
Yeah, 39.
Yeah.
It's like,
Right. Frame that.
wow.
It also has a, feels like a seal, an actual seal right there.
Oh, really?
But I thought it was interesting. It says, satisfactory degree of skill in rapid muscular movement penmanship.
Wow. Must have been my baseball career.
So that belongs to you.
Oh.
I've just been keeping it
Well, thank you. That's nice.
for a while. What kind of sports did the school have? Was it the full gamut of
Oh yeah, we had basketball and baseball and track.
and so forth?
Of course, in those days, I thought that was the main thing. I mean, there was no television
Right.
at that time, so
And that's
all three sports, and they had track meets and for the different little Jennings Lodge and Gladstone, and some of the Bolton area was in that group too. So
which kind of leads to a question we're all interested in of what did kids do
yeah,
when they weren't in school for fun type entertainment? I mean, obviously there's chores also, but
well, we used to go to. Well, there used to be a what's there now? I don't know, but west of the Concord School, there used to be a field, and that's where we had the track meets and so forth like that. Excuse me. On Saturdays we'd go play football or something like that. But in those days we worked. I mean, we weren't watching television. We were hoeing corn or planting potatoes, or because they had quite a bit of property. And during the Depression, my dad used to feed a lot of people in that area.
Used to fish too. Remember telling stories about rowing the boat behind the paddle
Yeah,
wheeler and
and no motors.
why would you row behind the paddle wheel?
Just for kids. Just being a kid. You see how close you could come to the paddle wheel, because that was the best way of coming back to the paddle wheel.
I thought maybe you'd get a draft and that would pull
No,
you along. Wow. So the work that you mentioned, what were some of your favorite outside chores and what were your least favorite chores?
I'll tell you, the least one was cleaning the chicken house. And I don't know. In those days, the kids worked, and we weren't looking to get in. For some of us, gotten into trouble, but I mean, not the way that are now. But so that was the worst one. Best chores? I don't know. I don't think there was any really good chores.
well, you mentioned too rendering the pigs down at the creek.
Yeah, we always had animals too. In other words, we had a cow and pigs and no horses, but of course the pigs all used to get loose, and you'd have to chase them out through the blackberries and so forth. So, but and then we used to grow most of our own food, peas, beans, corns, everything.
Lots of canning, I bet.
Yes, my mother did a lot of canning.
Yeah. What, so you, especially in the 30s and probably during the war, grew almost all of your food, if not all of your food then?
Yeah, of course there was a store at Oak Grove. That's why we associated with Oak Grove, because Jack Fenning had a meat market, and my dad used to sell the heifers or anything to the meat market, and then he traded for the food when McKeel's Market was there. So Jack Fenning had that market for years.
Did you ever go to Buchanan's little?
Oh yeah, yeah, you bet.
Was that for candy or just other things like?
Well, whatever. Actually, I spent church money. There used to be a church. I don't know whether it's still there or not. Just north of Buchanan's on that little side street. It was kind of a community church type thing.
Was it south of there?
Pardon?
North of Buchanan's or south?
North.
North. Okay, no.
No, I'm sorry, south.
Okay, I think that one is still there.
Is it?
Yeah.
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 So, actually, a penny was supposed to go into the collection, but it went to Buchanan's, and I heard about it.
Oh. So originally there was you had a dairy. Was there a dairy? The family had a dairy. Was there still a dairy when you were a kid, or were they pretty much sold off?
No, there was, but after they sold the dairy, then another, I think it was Stall and Huddle was their name, had another dairy. But then see, that was on the north side of Naef Road, and that was my aunt. And there was a little friction between my aunt, the family, when they split it up, as generally happens. Mm-hmm. And so then they rented that, because there was a house over there also on the north side or south side of Naef Road. So. Mm-hmm. And they lived there, and there was another farm there. As a matter of fact, the interurban span, and I think one of the owners was killed at the streetcar tracks, because the streetcar used to go back in there and it hit one of the dairy trucks, and I think he was killed. I don't know when that was, but Of course, I was, Uncle Sam wanted me in 1945, and so I was in the Army for 2 years, so there was a time lapse there when Uncle Sam wanted me instead of my family.
Yeah, yeah. So the trolley trail there, did you take the trolley?
Absolutely, yeah. That was our main transportation, actually. Was to Oregon City, was the main shopping place. So, and we used to go to Portland once in a while.
And I think the trolley stopped in '58.
I don't remember. I just read that not too long ago.
Was there? I'd heard something about a boardwalk on Naef Road.
Yeah, alongside of Naef Road, because it was actually from where the streetcar tracks are east was a swale. It was really low, and of course it was wet, and so that's how there was a boardwalk there to keep your feet dry.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I'd heard, and I haven't been able to confirm it, but that the owners of the property gave the land to the railroad if the railroad would put in a line there, so that they wouldn't have to take their milk or whatever downtown.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that
Yeah, they gave 2 acres, as a matter of fact.
Okay, 2 acres.
And there was a siding between Vineyard and Naef where they could transport their potatoes or whatever, their cattle or whatever, and they had a siding put in there.
Okay.
And so that was kind of interesting, because when it became the trolley trail, we were supposed to get some remuneration for the property, but then we had to trace all of our relatives back and contact them, and so it became a moot question. So it was donated, which is fine.
Yeah. So that siding must have been, I guess not all of the stops had a siding?
No, they didn't.
Just some of them.
And I think probably the Rothies used that siding also, and of course everybody from Vineyard would also, you know, it was any place where they could pull off and run the freight cars or whatever they had.
Well, I mentioned an atlas, another atlas that I have, I forgot what year, but it's early 1900s. It's a world atlas, and I happened to look in the back, and there was Naef, Oregon.
Oh, really?
Listed as a place, and so I looked in Oregon, and sure enough, there was a little red dot, and it said Naef on it. So it must have been considered important enough to get in to get in there. How often were the freight trains go through? Is that like a once a week or once a day?
No, because it was the main was to go to the mill in Oregon City. That's how they transported the paper. So where now it goes by, it used to go by boat, but I guess it doesn't go anyplace now because they closed the mill.
Yeah.
But that was how they transported the paper rolls from Oregon City to Portland. And so I would guess once or twice a day, probably. Maybe once there and twice a day. I'm not sure of that.
Yeah. Well, the railroad was obviously in when you were born, but the superhighway wasn't.
No.
Do you remember much of? I can't remember. In the 30s, sometime is what?
About 37.
37. So you were about 10 years old.
Right.
Do you remember kind of what it was like before and?
Yeah, because when Steele's bought the property for the Pansy Garden, my father continued to work for them, and so that where the McLaughlin was, they were supposed to put an underpass because that split their property in half. Or the McLaughlin is halfway between. Can't think of the road that's Harold. Yeah, between Harold and the streetcar track. And so their property was split, and they were supposed to put an underground tunnel so they could get the team, because it was all horses. They didn't have tractors in those days to get back and forth between, but that never materialized. So I can remember my dad not too happy with him because he had to cross that with a team of horses, and at that time there weren't that many cars. But so yeah, it went in 37 because I remember riding my bicycle between Naef Road and where the school was, and man, I had free reins of 4 lanes.
Yeah, I remember Buck told that story about the underpass and so forth, and he said it was just awful. You'd have to look very carefully because a car would go past about every 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, it did take the traffic off of River Road, because River Road used to be the main thoroughfare between, say, like Milwaukee and Oregon City, was either River Road or Oatfield Road. And there was quite a discussion because the Oatfields wanted the car line to go for them, but it was more, I guess it was more plausible to go where it is now rather than the hill. Of course, you go up a hill to where Oatfield is.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And do you remember much about the some of the businesses along there? There must have been, because I still see them, some motels up and down.
On McLaughlin?
On McLaughlin.
Yeah, yeah. Jack Eldridge, the fellow kid I went to grade school with there, they had a small motel would be on the, it'd be, let's see, be north of Rothy and east of McLaughlin. They had a small motel there. But there weren't there, but actually the Schmidhammers built a trailer house, or a trailer park. It would be south of Concord and on the west side of the highway. That was one of the things. And then, of course, there's always a service station on Concord and McLaughlin on the west side. And that's, and Buchanan's or Old Grove is a grocery store. Ashdale Dairy Ashdale Dairy used to be there at, I think it's Boardman, and it was really a nice ice cream parlor type thing. Good ice cream.
So they not only had the Ashdale Dairy, but also they sold ice cream and.
I don't know. No, I think I just remember them selling ice cream. I don't believe they had a dairy.
Okay.
Because Crab had a dairy, a small one on River Road, would be south of Rothy. There's actually a barn type thing there now.
Still
that used
there,
to
right?
That's a barn. I think it's an electrical shop there now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was called Crab's Dairy?
I think it's CRABB.
Okay. Well, you mentioned River Road being the main road. I know there's the culvert there, that Boardman Creek. When I got here, I thought it was Naef Creek, but.
Well, it actually was. You had it right.
Oh, it used to be called Naef?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's it, because both creeks used to join on the property. There was a creek that came from the south, which drained that area, and there used to be a peat bog at Rothy across from where the mill used to be. Okay, there used to be a peat bog there. Well, that drained that property there, but then there was also a small spring. It would be east of Harold. They used to drain down through the property of Steele's, and then there was a culvert under McLaughlin that drained, and then it went due north towards halfway between Vineyard and Naef, and then it came back south again and joined on the property. So there's actually two creeks there. But then when they put a drain, because of the car dealerships, they had a surface water management. What they did was they made a mistake, is they drained that property that used to go south. They drained it right down Naef Road, which put a burden on the structure between Naef Road and the creek that goes underneath. There's a culvert underneath River Road there too.
Yeah.
Very small.
Yeah.
But that water used to back up when we have a lot of rain.
Yeah. I can remember Naef Road being flooded in '96.
Ready to go, yes.
And then just 2.5 years ago, it was flooded even worse than in '96. The Stringfield Park,
Right.
with the bridges, the water was over the bridges.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, over the bridges on it. Now that culvert on River Road, that of course was put in sometime. I wonder when it was put in and how did people get across there before that was put in?
I have no idea. Because that would have been put in, I suppose, when the road went in, and the road's been in there a long time.
Yeah, because I heard that was maybe originally an Indian trail.
Possibly.
But it's pretty steep there.
Yes.
And a lot of fill, so well, we'll have to ask somebody else who might know.
Well, we used to own where the Stringfield Park is. That used to be out of that north or the south part of Naef Road. That 2.5 acres there, my dad had that because he was going to build a house there. Well, then he sold to the Stringfields, and then that's how the Stringfields. What the boy's name?
Yeah,
Tom.
There's a couple. Yeah, Tom. I think.
Tom. It was Tommy and I forget what the boys' names were, but anyway. So then we sold that property to the Stringfields, and then their sons, I think, are the one that donated it to the Parks Department.
Yeah.
And speaking of Indians, they found several arrowheads when they were cultivating the ground too. I've got a lot of those.
Yeah.
someplace.
Oh, really? For when they were building Stringfield Park, or you mean cultivating?
No,
Cultivating.
My dad used to cultivate that, which is on the corner where Brian is now, and where the old Naef house. Well, that used to be all garden, and that's during the tillage is when the Indian heads, arrowheads, and so forth came up.
Well,
No
there's
Indians.
also, and I don't know exactly where it was, but they said the very first schoolhouse, this is like in 1850-60, was built right around that area.
I think it was just the culvert you're speaking of. I believe, I'm not sure, but I believe it was just, it would be east of River Road and directly north. There used to be a grape arbor there, and I think there was a field there alongside of Bradshaw's house. And Bradshaw was a Risley. She was a Risley. And I think that's where the original school was. But Nancy Starkweather could probably tell you about, because her father was quite, her grandfather, I guess, was quite active in that.
In the school area, yeah. Well, let's take a little break. I'd like some water.
Okay.
I'll fix that for you.
I heard rumors that Switzerland had a compulsory military, I don't know what you call it.
It's
When you became a certain age, you had to join the army.
Yeah.
And you had to stay in the army. And evidently my grandfather didn't appreciate that. So he pulled forks.
That's,
Right.
yeah, it's interesting. My wife's family, the same thing happened. He was about 20, and in 1870 left Denmark
Oh,
because the Bismarck was going to force him into the German army, and he was Danish.
right.
But yeah, boy, that's interesting. Would your father speak much German around the house? Or
It
something?
was a Swiss German. No, not around. I had a Whiter, who was my grandmother's maiden name, and actually her, let's see, it'd be her daughter's children came from Switzerland, and we had a nice visit with them several years ago, and we communicate with them occasionally. But my Bertha, which was my father's first cousin, they used to speak mostly Swiss and German. I mean, it's the German Swiss.
Right.
Evidently, the Swiss people have either Italian Swiss or German Swiss, like that. So that was the Germans. Now, whether it was to speak that we couldn't understand them or not, I don't know. But anyway, yeah, they spoke a Swiss German, but not fluent. I mean, that was it as far as. I think my grandfather was quite active in the Swiss. There was a Swiss society or something in Portland, and he was active in that.
Yeah. Well, some of our students here have some questions. I know one was on gardening or so.
Actually, yeah, I'm going to school for a lot of horticulture and agricultural things, and I heard that you guys had some sort of in on the pansy farm. And I was just wondering what the ideas for organic gardening back then were. Were the practices very common, or were even synthetic fertilizers even?
No, actually, with the dairy, you had plenty of fertilizer, and that's probably where most of it was coming. I mean, the organic wasn't really a thing. You know?
Right.
I mean, this is like
there was not so much synthetics at that time. Then.
no,
Okay,
no,
definitely.
no, not that I know of.
Yeah, I couldn't see that.
Yeah.
It was pretty important, the newer, because I read through one of the papers, and there was an attorney from Lake Oswego, and there was a dispute between the Naefs and the Rothies, and it included a property line and the pile of manure. It was that important. It was mentioned in the lawsuit.
What was that? Who it belonged to, or
Yeah, right. Like,
or
who did-
we wanted to get
yeah.
rid of it?
No, they wanted. It was like, that was an important thing, the property line and the manure pile.
Yeah.
Because the Rothies bought, at the same time that I think that the Naefs bought, the Rothies bought, and they bought from, I don't know what was it, you have that paper,
Yeah.
remember where the line, but it was, there was a dispute on the property, when you get to the river, because we used to own where Waldo Vista goes down, well, that used to be all a Naef property at one time. And they sold to a church group that put in a convalescent for a TB hospital. And that's when they sold everything from River Road to the river. So.
And then they put in the TB?
Yeah, they did. And I don't know where the building is.
Yeah, I think it's those buildings that are in there by the creek.
Right by the creek? Oh, I've always wondered
To the
about
left,
that
yeah,
building.
where you go down.
Yeah, you go down and
Yeah.
it's on the left there, and it looked too
Right.
big to be a house.
Right.
Actually, we were going to build down there, my wife and I, but the bridge was not adequate, so that's why we ended up building over here on Oatfield. So.
Well, another thing when I first moved to the neighborhood in '79, I went over to your brother's house, and there he was composting.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is neat, this is new. And he said, no, this is not new. I've been doing it for over 150 years now, but for a long time. So yeah, they'd been composting forever and ever and ever. Just,
Yeah, right. Well, there were no garbage trucks, you know, so what are you going to do?
yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
So the animals that you had, is it true that you used just almost every part, including I think it's called head cheese, which is a
Well, we used to make head cheese. My mother used to make head cheese.
yeah.
You bet. Yeah.
Is there, that's brains, right?
Well, no.
No?
The brains were separate.
Okay.
How's everybody's stomach? No, brains and eggs were breakfast,
Okay.
and then what was left over, they'd boil the head, and that's how it became it was kind of a cheesy type thing, and that's how I suppose they got the name of head cheese.
Oh, so it's boiling what was kind of left over the head
Right. The
after
brains
you've
come out.
eaten most of
Right.
the brains.
Threw everything away but the squeal.
Yeah. Well, I've eaten tongue a couple of times.
Have
and,
you? Yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know. Maybe it wasn't fixed right or so.
Yeah.
It seemed awfully tough.
They should have pickled it. Now, people don't realize that in those days, you didn't just jump in the car and go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
You know, my dad used to cure his own hams, make his own sausage. Matter of fact, still have the sausage press where you put the meat in the handle and push the handle down and clean the guts out, and there you had your sausage.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he cured his own ham.
Make your own
Had his own
casings?
smokehouse.
Make the casings too?
No, the casings were the intestines.
Well, but I mean,
Oh yeah,
you know,
yeah,
clean
clean them,
them,
boil them, and so forth.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
wow.
And they had a
And
well on the property and a pump, and then they had a retaining, a large metal cylinder or metal tank.
tank is about 700 gallons. My father originally was going to, actually for a couple of years, he went to California. He and a friend were going to build houses in California, and that didn't pan out. And so when he came back, they put in the tank because they were going to put houses on the corner of Naef and River Road where this vacant field is. So, and my sister, when my mother passed away, well, then my sister ended up with that property, and then during the dispute, well, then she gave the property to Doug and Brian.
And so was that then the well that was used for drinking water that you
Yes,
mentioned?
The well is still there. I was always going to do something because it probably should be tested, of course, but the well is still there behind Brian's house. The tank has been removed, but the well is still there. And I used to have the old, the old big geared tank with the wooden deal that had the deal. So,
Well, where Carlton is, although they got bought out, the saw chain,
pardon?
Carlton, the saw chain on Naef Road, they were, was there like a spring there at one point? Because they
That's
had
on the north side of Naef.
on the north side of Naef, right across from the post office.
Yeah, that's
Right.
where Carlton is, yeah.
Yeah. Is that where Carlton is?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a spring. As a matter of fact, that's how they irrigated the pansy fields. They irrigated the pansy fields because the pansy fields were what is now would be east of McLaughlin. That whole, where the car dealerships are basically, that was all pansy field to Naef Road, and then on the north side on the south side of Naef Road was the drive-in.
Yeah.
And pansy seed sold for more per ounce than gold did at the time.
And they had the largest independent pansy seed business in the world.
I did some searching on the web, and Steele's pansies came up.
Oh, did you?
Boom, 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 like that. Biggest pansies, I guess, ever. Yeah, it was pretty interesting.
And they used to employ about, I think they must have had 20 or 25 seed pickers in the prime. And then a Lehman, which is down on 39th and Clinton, she was a Steele. And then Donald, which is they call Bud Steele, ran the plant. And then they moved, when they sold the property, then they moved out to Canby. And I have no idea what's going on now with them. And they had a daughter, Nancy.
Sally.
Sally, right.
Yeah, I met her once.
You're with it, aren't you?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And she has MS, I think, and then living in, last I heard, in Reno or Las Vegas someplace. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and I met Chuck Galen, who bought the Steele's Pansy Garden.
Oh, uh-huh.
And it's now run by his daughter.
Oh, in Canby?
But no longer pansies. They're doing
Oh, really?
food that they then, I think they go to farmers markets and so forth.
Well, they were associated with St. John's Flowers or something, Floral. Was that Galen from there, or was that, I don't know either.
I don't know. Students have another question?
One of my questions was, what were like your hobbies at the time, like things when you weren't working and doing chores and.
I didn't get the question.
Oh, what were your hobbies? Kind of, he'd already asked you that same question.
Oh.
As far as what kind of hobbies you enjoy.
We like to fish. We fish in the Willamette, and there used to be trout in that little creek there. Catch crawdads.
Did you ever see any salmon in the creek?
I'm not going to answer that.
Yeah, now you got me curious why. Well, I heard, I think it was Dot, Buck's wife, who said that she was down there once and happened to have a pitchfork and saw this fish and got it. But I forgot to ask her what kind it was. I was kind of hoping it'd be a salmon.
Yeah.
Makes it an interesting story. But as far as hobbies, like collecting stamps or so, I remember when I was growing up, we didn't have much, but stamps were easy because they're free and they come in the mail once in a
Yeah,
while.
you're right. I had a stamp collection.
Yeah.
And a penny board.
Yeah.
Penny and so forth. And I liked sports. We always played all the sports in grade school. Enjoyed that.
What's a penny board?
Oh, you used to collect pennies, then you used to have a board that you tried to fill in where each penny went into the slot for the different years from like 1909 up to. So.
And then there was San Francisco, Denver, Philadelphia, I think.
And the SVDB.
Oh yeah.
No one ever had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bob, I have a question.
Sure.
There's a lot of, I'm learning there were a number of landings on the Willamette River. Rothy Landing, Risley Landing, for example.
Uh-huh.
What's your understanding of those were there others that I haven't mentioned, or? And when you went fishing, where did you?
Well, we used to keep the boat, actually, knew where Doug lives?
No.
No.
Laurelwood Drive, there's a pond between Walta Vista and Laurelwood Drive.
Yeah, well, I used to keep my boat, or my dad, during the wintertime when there's no farming, well, then he'd build a boat. So then the rowboat, we used to keep just between Rothy and Risley, which is, well, there's a jut of rocks that come out there, which is just above where the pond is. And we used to swim in the pond, believe it or not. And it was, why we didn't get everything that is manageable, I don't know, because, you know, the pulp mills would have these great big pulp that they just put in the river and down they went. And it wasn't the cleanest place, but it was. So that's where I used to keep the boat. And of course, I just walk from where I was born and raised, just down over the hill, and I was there.
But at that time, the Naefs didn't own down to the water?
Yes. Let's see. No. No. No.
Okay.
Probably sold to that other outfit.
Yeah.
When was that sold? Do you have an idea about?
The property is.
The Walta Vista property?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
But it would have been, I would guess, I suppose in the 30s during the Depression, because that's when they lost everything, except for what is where Brian is now.
I can remember your brother launching his boat at Rothy.
Rothy, it used to be a little, but it wasn't good at all. I mean, it was just a gravel at Rothy, you know, where Ernie Rothy used to live. Then there was a little road that went down, and that was about the only place to launch it if you kept your boat on a trailer.
Okay.
So we used to just tie it up on the bank and go home and come back, and it was there.
Yeah, well, I know they had rowboats out of Rothy Landing. And
They did.
Summer
As a matter-
cabins along there for a period of time.
Right, and actually Madden's had boats that you could rent at the end of Jennings.
Oh,
You know, we used to go, you go west on Jennings and go left instead of going right, and that would go down into where Madden's landing. And they had rental boats there also.
That's probably where Jane lives.
Yes,
Going down.
except she goes right and then sharply turns left and what goes.
Yeah, Holes used to live, I can remember, they were good friends of my parents. The Holes used to live, instead of right where, if you went straight, you'd run into their garage. And you had to walk all the way from there, all the way down to the river, and it was quite a hike. And Carl and Eva used to carry groceries and kids and everything else
Wow.
down there. And then I think Spooners lived there in that area, and I don't know, I don't remember the people's names now, but it's a nice area.
So one more question
Sure.
about the pansy garden. I think your mother worked there for a while, right?
Yes, she did, huh?
Was she picking the?
Picking the seeds,
Because those seeds are pretty small, aren't they?
Well, the seeds are very fine, but they're in a pod.
Oh.
And then they'd pick the pods. And then there used to be a kind of a drying house that was just where 7-Eleven is now, because that was closer to McLaughlin. And there was a drying house, and then they used to have these white sacks and hang them to where the seed pods dried. And after the seed pods dried, then they had a threshing unit that was on 39th and Clinton. And I used to go there and help them thresh the seeds to get the seeds for the commercial type to sell.
Ah.
Brian still has the Pansy Steel sign in his kitchen. No.
Yeah, in his kitchen. So.
Yeah.
And it was then prepared in 39th and Clinton? Was there a reason for it?
That's the sister was kind of the secretary manager of the business, because both the Seals had passed away by then.
Okay.
And Donald was in the service World War II, and so she was running the business. And at 39th and Clinton, and then they turned that into a kind of a bed and breakfast, I think, or a place where you could have weddings and so forth. And in the basement was where they threshed the seeds. And then she did all the mailing from that point. The Steels was just the Steels house, who bought from my parents. That house actually was just where the Steels lived. I mean, that's where they took care of the farm, and then she took care of the seed business. So
And where was the Steele's house?
this is where our house was. They bought Eldon Steele was the one that took over running the farm after my parents sold, and he had a heart attack. And as you go west on Naef Road, there used to be that swale, and he had a 38 or 39 Ford, and at the time there was one tree that was on the side of the road, and I'll be darned if when he had his heart attack, the car ended up next to that tree so that it didn't go down into the field. So that's where they found him.
Ah.
Where they had a heart attack.
So was the Steele's house then was on Naef Road, or was it on River Road?
No, it was on Naef. Well, it was. I have to think twice. It was north. Well, right across from where the post office is now.
Ah.
There's actually it's where the. It's
Where that swell started.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, there's a picture there that shows, we were trying to associate the house, the original house, and it showed a fence around this spring that you're speaking of, where they used to pump the water, and there's a picture of that in that. So,
Well, Carlton has, starting maybe, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago, done a lot of work very close to where that spring must have been.
yes.
Because I think they had pollution problems or something.
Yeah, because that's how they, they were irrigating probably, I'm guessing 10 or 15 acres of pansies, because there was also a pansy field this creek I'm talking about in the back. Well, on that hill up there, I don't know what, there used to be a motel back in there. I don't know what it is now, but anyway, then they used to have pansies over there too, besides on the other side of McLaughlin. So.
Wow. So I'm kind of jumping around a little bit.
Sure.
But, so food, we know about that. What about clothing or things like sugar and salt?
Did you ever hear of hand-me-downs? I had a very rich aunt that lived in Los Angeles who was an attorney, and she had children about the same age as I was, so every time when she'd visit, I'd get new clothes.
Now, was she a Naef side or a
She was a Knots.
A Knots.
N-O-T-Z,
Okay. Because I think the Knots, I did a little looking on them. They came from Switzerland too.
Yes, I'm a full-blooded Swiss. My father was born in Switzerland, but my parents were both Swiss.
Yeah.
So
100%.
100%. And I married an English person.
Do you recall when the Super Drive-In opened up? Was that like a big thing to now have a drive-in on the...
It was, but I don't remember. I think they must have opened up when I was in the service. I'm not sure. It must have been around
50-ish. I think it was in 50 or 52 or somewhere.
Must have, because three of us were going to have a service station on the on the northeast where the Chevrolet dealership is now. We were going to put a service station in. We all three of us had come out of the service at the same time, and we had our severance pay, and we were going to build a service station at that point. But Kronberg wanted $100 a foot for McLaughlin Avenue, and we couldn't hack that by any means, so we gave that one up.
I think that's where they had that truck repair place, Fruhoff or something.
Fruhoff trailer.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, was in there for a long time.
Yeah.
Any more questions from the... Okay.
Actually, I just kind of wanted to go back a little bit to the hobbies. We had talked about it a little bit that Oaks Park was open around that time, and that the trolley had ran very near there. Did you go? What
Yes,
was that
no,
experience like? What was like the newest, greatest thing at Oaks
They had
Park?
a big roller rink there at Oaks Park, and we used to go there occasionally.
And was that all that was all that was there at the time?
I don't believe so, but I don't think there was that much, not compared to what there is now. So.
Right.
So was that a place where you go to meet girls, or
Oh,
just
kind of, yeah.
the guys would go there just to kind of hang out? And
Funny story. Neil Sutherland and I had a 36 Phaeton Ford with a Mercury motor with a McCulloch blower, and it would move. I mean, we could go. That's when McLaughlin was in, and man, we had full run, and that thing would move. And so we had picked up a couple girls at Oaks Park, and we were coming out, and it was raining, and the windshield wiper blades were, you kids will appreciate this, but windshield wiper blades were about this tall. And so here Neil was driving in the front seat, and I was in the back seat, and there used to be a place called Oregon Woodwork Limited where they did woodworking on the, I don't know what street that is, but anyways, you come out of Oaks Park right across the street. And I worked there during the summer in unloading boxcars from wood. Anyway, here was this, they'd parked this damn boxcar there with a big coupler, and we took that thing right in the middle, and that took care of the blower and the whole work. So, and I don't even remember how we got, but the girls took off, and Neil and Dyden and I were still sitting there with the car. But it was a beautiful car, but then we eventually got it back together. And
Are you blaming that whole thing on the windshield wipers?
that's right. That's right. The small windshield wiper. Yeah.
so you worked on cars then. Was that just at somebody's
kind of a
house?
hobby.
Somebody had enough tools to kind of make a go of it? And
Right. And they were simple, and Model A's was the thing, and then the 36 Ford, the 36 Ford Phaeton was a car in those days, because the Phaeton was the one that didn't have the windows. It had the curtains on the side, and then we had a padded Duray top, which was a padded Carson top. And so, and then, of course, when I got into service, when I was overseas, I was an auto mechanic instructor.
oh,
So,
Was there a park where Kellogg Lake is? Did you remember hearing about that one time? There was I remember somebody talking.
There was
about there, but
what they call that? Crystal Lake Park, which would be north of Harrison. And you talk about pastime. My father used to pitch for the Crystal Lake Park on Sundays because that's the only day he had off. And so it was a Swiss type of a Swiss. And they used to have Swiss picnics there too. So years ago. So I don't even know what's there now. I think there's probably apartments or something there
there's-
now.
I think apartments went in, what, 15, 20 years ago or so?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd heard about that place, but,
yeah, that's a long time ago.
yeah. So the winemaking, that's a real Swiss thing.
Yes, it is.
Do you have any stories about that, or how much, or what?
I can remember when my mother used to be upset with the gnats because they had to draw the gnats like you couldn't
Yeah.
believe. And we used to have the old wine press, it was a double geared type thing. You'd turn the crank and crush the grapes, and then you have the mash barrels, and then the wine would ferment and burn the gnats off and drain them off and put them in the barrel and watch them work.
Yeah, Buck when we first moved in, he showed us and he said, "Now smell this wine."
Yeah,
Oh, gnats up your nose.
yeah,
He was laughing like anything. We didn't think it was too funny.
yeah,
But he put in too much sugar for me.
yeah.
But where were the grapes from? I mean, were they from this area?
At first, they were behind Brian's house. You know where Brian's house is?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, that back corner where it's where the pole barn is, and that back field was where the grapes were. But there weren't enough grapes there. They'd have to buy grapes different places to
And then
make.
just bring 'em
Because
in.
my dad used to make, I don't know, probably a couple hundred gallons of wine.
Yeah,
So,
Buck did too.
yeah, he did. Yeah, I think that was, oh well.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's another story.
Yeah.
And the kind of incidental to that is that actually when the family split up, they were concerned about no one in the Naef family living still in the area. But Brian is still in the original Naef house.
Yeah.
And I think Randy, my nephew, sold, I don't know how many times or something went, and I don't even know if that house it's not kept up very well.
Yeah, there's new people in there.
Is
and
there?
They're doing very, very, they're very good people.
Are they? Good.
Yeah, and they're interested in buying it.
Are they?
Yeah, so.
Because I don't know whether, it was a friend of Randy's that, I don't know whether he bought it or was buying it or something, I don't know. I just,
Yeah, there were some problems with all of that.
yeah,
But the new people, oh my goodness, they're out there farming and
Oh,
cleaning
good.
up the inside of
Good.
the house and fixing this and that.
because Brian really keeps up
Yeah,
that field. As a matter of fact, he just used the tractor and flail to cut it down just today or yesterday. So he does, he was in Europe for 3 weeks, so he just got back, so.
so the farming, you had draft horses for...
Horses,
But as far as, I mean, that was just plowing then and...
Plowing and harrowing and disking and floating and
Okay, what kind of crops would be grown?
potatoes. And that was the main crop, I think. Because after they got rid of the dairy, then they did the farming. But my dad used to farm that whole field that's on the corner of, Naef and River Road. Well, he used to have corn, potatoes, everything, peas, tomatoes, the whole
Little bit
works.
everything. So there weren't any large fields of wheat
No.
on your property?
Not that I,
Okay.
no.
Because I know some people did that and...
Yes.
But,
No, it was kind of a diversified type
yeah.
farm.
Okay, well, I think we're pretty close to finish with the time on that thing. And I'm kind of out of my questions here for now, but love to take
I'm out of brains.
What is Brian's house number? Is he on River Road?
Yeah, 17216.
And I remember when I moved in, the zip code was 97222.
Yeah.
And then I had to do all these change of addresses, and they say, "Where'd you move?" I said, "I didn't move. I just got a new zip code."
Right. And that's what ours are. Ours is 97. I live on Oatfield, just on the kind of
Live on Oakfield.
on the south end.
just by Alder, where Aldercrest cuts off Oatfield.
On Nixon,
Aldercrest.
Where
Oh,
the
way
big
down the
curves
hill
is.
then.
Aldercrest on the curve, and Nixon comes in right at that point, and we're right up on top of the hill.
Oh,
So
Actually, you can come in from
but you're on-
Briggs,
Leffelman,
Leffelman and Briggs and
Pinehurst.
Snowberry and
So what is your street?
Nixon.
Nixon, okay.
And we're on a,
Do you know the Briggs sisters then?
oh yeah, I went to school with
Adele or?
Adele, no, not,
Enid?
Enid.
Adele. Adele and I were in the same class.
We just interviewed them a few days ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice people,
Yeah,
very nice.
great interview with the two of them.
Yeah, well, I think they're quite active in the Historical Society in Milwaukee also.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Barbara Anderson has also got involved with that, and then Don Ray was in the Historical Society also, and so.
You said that Brian's in the original Naef house?
Well, it's the second.
The second house, actually. Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah. The original Neff house was the one that's where the Social Security or whatever is. It's quite a bit east, quite a bit west of McLaughlin.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that's the house the house my dad built, actually.
Would that be anywhere near where the original Cashes had their house? They lived on the highway and.
The who, the,
The Cashes, K-A-S-C-H. Eventually, they became quite a nursery in Portland, down by Tacoma, and
I know the name, but I don't think they were in that area, because,
they had a White House near the Teleview outdoor drive-in, you know.
Teleview or the 99E.
Oh, you're right. Teleview is the one.
Teleview
that's
is some other
inside down
place.
In Jennings Lodge.
Yes.
Corrected, 99E.
99E was the drive-in
Yeah.
that my aunt sold.
Thank you for reminding me.
Was there another